Welcome back to episode 6 of Avayat Studio Goes to Space. So last time we left Angee Kerman in orbit of Kerbin on his mission to land on the moon. And if you remember, I had set myself a challenge to do it in IVA mode as much as I could using this enhanced IVA mod. So here's our spacecraft. We have this 2-stage lander. And the plan is to leave the bottom stage on the moon once we've burned off all of its fuel to land. And then we have an upper stage that's very overbuilt. It has like 1.5 kilometers per second of delta V, which is more than we need. So here I'm just setting the moon as my target from the screens inside the cockpit, which is not normally something you can do in the stock game. And yeah, I'm trying to see if there's any way that I can actually set maneuver nodes from in here, but I don't think there really is. So yeah, switch to the display, and you can see now it shows us where the moon is and its orbit, whereas before we just saw our craft in orbit around Kerbin. So yeah, now unfortunately this means I am going to have to kind of break the challenge a little bit, and I will have to use the map view to create our maneuver node. And so that's what I do. You can see, sped it up here so you don't have to watch me messing around with the node creation. And just setting up a nice encounter, trying to maximize the efficiency that I can get. I can save a whole about 30 meters per second, which is not a lot because this is a very overbuilt craft. But then we go ahead and start our burn. This is a very long, slow burn to the moon. This this transfer stage has plenty of delta V to take us to the moon and actually finish our orbital insertion once we get there. But it has, as you can see, we're getting 0.7 Gs of acceleration on this thing, which for this 900 meter per second, 850s thereabouts, it takes a pretty long time. It's about maybe 7 meters per second for about 800 meters per second of delta V that we're doing. So, a pretty long burn, about 2 or 3 minutes. So we just go through and complete it. You can see our indicator there. On the right side there, we have the blue path, which is our maneuver orbit, and the green, which is our actual path that we're on. And, just switching through, checking all these numbers, watching our progress go through as we make this burn that will set us on a course to the moon, hopefully not a collision course. We will want to do that in a very slow and controlled manner once we actually get there. And there we have our encounter. Now, it doesn't actually show me what my moon periapsis is, or I guess my perilune or perimoon, in this indicator, so I have to go check it in the map view. Now, what's interesting is, they have the apogee and perigee, or the apoapsis periapsis, which is like the general name, but for each body in the actual solar system, the name is different. So around the sun, it's aphelion and perihelion. Around the moon, it's, I believe, perilune and apolune. For Jupiter, it's apojove and perijove, based on, I think, either the Greek or the Roman names of each body. But yeah, now we just admire the view of Kerbin shrinking away from us as we rocket away towards the moon, which is slightly inaccurate language because we're not actually, being propelled by our rockets. We're just kind of drifting sedately, admiring the view, watching the bodies shrink away from us. And we should actually be able to see the moon because, as you can see, it's basically directly away from Kerbin. And yeah, we're kind of pointed in the right direction. So yeah, rolling the spacecraft, we can actually maybe get both of them in the viewport there. Yeah, there's the moon out the window, and just trying to see if I can frame things just right. Get Kerbin out the window there, and it looks like I can actually kind of see it through the metal there. And yeah, we're eventually just going to scrap that and do our actual warp away to the moon. Because we have places to be, we have science to do. Angee wants to feel the moon beneath his boots. Let's actually see if we can see it on our approach. Yep, there it is there. mostly just a dark mass blocking out the stars at this point, but once we get closer, yeah, now we're in the sphere of influence. So our periapsis, peri-moon, is about 36 kilometers, which is pretty high. I like to get in very low and close over the surface of the moon. It's mostly just personal preference. You don't really have to. 36 is fine. But I'm going to try to get this down to about maybe 20 or even a little bit lower than that. I went between radial in and retrograde, which is probably not the best way to do this. I think radial in would honestly be more efficient, but it helps to slow down a little bit. And just a touch of the throttle there. 23, 22, I'll probably go for 17, 18 kilometers or thereabouts. 18, 17, yeah, that's good. And now we can just go ahead, warp down to our periapsis there, tracking it on the indicator, because that's easier to judge. It's also easier to tell if I'm going to hit a mountain. I generally don't go below about 15 kilometers because there are some pretty tall mountains on the moon. And it's very unfortunate when you end up hitting them when you're in orbit. So yeah, now we just have to insert ourselves into an orbit so that we actually stay here. The flyby was Jonas's mission. We're here for a much more close encounter with the moon. So I think we have enough fuel. We have plenty of fuel in this injection stage still, so we'll be able to circularize our orbit. And we'll also be able to start our landing burn with this. And yeah, we have 500 meters per second left. The orbital speed around the moon is very, very low. I mean, the orbital speed, about 2 kilometers per second around Kerbin, is similar to how fast you actually go in orbit around the moon, like Earth's moon in real life. Because the game is at 1/10 scale. At some point I may do a realistic progression playthrough. Although I don't want to do it just like boring. I might try to do, completing all the programs with breakneck speed. Although I figure I should probably finish my first, actual experience with that to see if I can actually, know what I'm doing and learn all this stuff. But I distract myself. We have different matters at hand. We have a different planet to land on, a different moon to land on, because the moon is not a planet. In fact, if Kerbin was in our solar system, it would be probably a dwarf planet, because it is so small. Although, to allow for it to have 1 g of gravity, it is anomalously dense. And yeah, now here we are in a circular orbit around the moon. And yeah, I'm going to have to go into map view for this, because if I want any chance at all to pick my landing site, then I need to actually be able to see it. And in order to see something, I have to be in the map view. So that crater there looks pretty good. It's probably going to be more flat than these other areas. And it will also give us a nice direct link with the Kerbal Space Center. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to wait until I'm about a third or a quarter of the planet away from it, or the moon away from it. So, like 90 to about 130 degrees away. And here I'm going to make not 130, what am I saying? Close enough that my periapsis won't be directly over it, but instead kind of a little in front of it. Which will allow me to be descending while I'm over the crater instead of traveling in flat level flight, which is generally good because it's a bit annoying to have to deal with when you have to make yourself kind of fall towards the surface instead of being already having some downward momentum. Now, I like to fly very much low to the surface in a very shallow path, which is risky and can have some dangers with it, such as not being able to slow down in time. But, I've done these things before. It's fun to try it in a new way. So that should be pretty good for us. So yeah, I get my periapsis down to about 7 kilometers there. And as we get closer and closer to our landing site, we just keep gently slowing us down so we slowly bring ourselves over. And in fact, I think I'm going to do a small plane change because I want to have a bit more of a window over this crater instead of just the tiny sliver, so that I can actually have a little more freedom in picking my landing sites, and I'm less likely to land on, the side of the crater, which would be pretty bad. Because when you try to plant a spacecraft on the side of something, it generally tends to fall over, which can be undesirable. But, to each their own. Maybe you want your landers to fall over. It's not me to choose. And that's pretty good. There's a few roughly flat patches that we'll pass over. Although the map view can be deceptive, especially for something like the moon, where there's lots and lots of tiny craters that will appear as you get closer and closer. So you kind of just have to fly it by eye. And you can't really, there's mods and plugins that will allow you to actually survey the moon and scan it and create terrain maps, which is probably closer to what, you'd actually do. I mean, they determined the Apollo landing sites by having Apollo 8 and 10. They would fly over, they picked the launch windows and everything to be over the inclinations where they thought they were going to land in the future. And then they would just extensively photograph different spots, different places to see how good the landing sites may have been and how favorable they were for actually landing some people on there. And so almost all, I believe, of the Apollo landing sites, they had about 5 for each mission. And then they would just eliminate to a few and then pick one that they actually wanted to go for. And the others would serve as backups. But all of them were basically chosen and decided on by the Apollo 8 and 10 astronauts. And there's probably some other scanning satellites that, provided some better up-close images of the surface. But, you really like a human eye on these things. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm just completely guesstimating my way down here. So, yeah, at this point, we've just got a long slog to go. Stage lock there so that I don't accidentally fire anything. And yeah, now you can see we've got the landing indicator courtesy of Flight Engineer. I don't know how much I'm going to be using that. I honestly kind of don't like it. I like to be able to, kind of not know exactly where I'm coming down. I'm also going to take the crew report from Space Near the Mun, because if you recall, on our flyby mission, when we passed in our near approach to the moon, we did not have comms link to the Kerbal Space Center. So I couldn't actually take that measurement, but we have that now. And now we're just going to warp down, get in close to our landing site. Now I don't want to slow too aggressively because I don't want to hit that crater rim, which is why I'm burning slightly upwards here to just pass myself over it there. And yeah, now we just keep going. And I'm pretty low over the terrain. I'm about 2 kilometers above it and falling. I'm also going with this suicide burn countdown here from Flight Engineer, which will help us save some fuel, although I'm definitely going to be starting that a bit early because I want some time to, give myself some room for error. And you can see we're getting the master alarm there because we are passing below 1 kilometer above the terrain. So I'm burning upwards now. And I'm just going to burn off the rest of the fuel that I have in this transfer stage, which is going to give us about, half of our speed. You can see the ground zipping by there. This is a very, very shallow descent, which I find very fun, but it can be pretty challenging, especially in flying in the IVA like this when you have very, very limited ability to see what's actually going on. Not something I would recommend for your first time landing on the moon. So just roll over so I can actually see things a little bit better and judge if I'm going to come down over a crater or a slope. And yeah, now that we are, leveled out, I'm actually going up, I believe. We can start to kill our horizontal speed now. And yeah, ditch that stage. Ignite our next engine and switch over to our camera. So what I'm going to go for is that flat area just in front of those craters there. So I'm going to have to start going to the side so I don't land on the slope. And I'm not going with the landing indicator because it doesn't show up in this view. So I'm just going to completely eyeball this. Now we're going a good ways up. Now, it was a fun build challenge to try to fit a lander in the size restricted, like non-procedural 1.25 meter fairing. The only problem is that results in a very tall and skinny lander, which if you recall the Intuitive Machines moon landers, how they both fell over, it can be pretty bad if you have a very tall and skinny thing. So now what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to delay my descent so that I come down over this flatter area. Kind of like how this is similar to what Neil Armstrong did on the Apollo 11 landing, where the computer was bringing them down in the selected landing spot. And then he looked out the window and saw that the computer was actually landing them on a field of boulders, which would have destroyed the spacecraft. So instead, he overrode the computer and basically just burned pointing straight up so that they were hovering but moving sideways until they got to a flatter area. Except that's not what I'm doing anymore because I have killed almost all of my horizontal speed and I am now just gently bringing us down. And we've actually gone up quite a bit. We're now 2 kilometers up. And, normally I would just kind of let myself fall a little bit more. Except with this, it's very hard to judge if I'm on a slope, and I want to give myself enough reaction time and come down very gently. And we have tons of delta V in this. We could go back into orbit with this lander stage right now, and I want to leave it on the surface. So, just taking the very slow, cautious approach, letting myself fall. Controlled fall. Trying to keep it around about 20 or 30 meters per second here because I don't want to pick up too much speed. Moon's gravity is weak, but it is deceptively strong, honestly. It's very easy to just cut your engines for a little bit and all of a sudden you're falling at a speed which would destroy your landing gear. Which I don't really want to happen. I actually want to land this thing because I have science and instruments and all other manner of things that I want to do here. So now, mostly just keeping my speed constant, about 800 meters above the terrain now. So I'm going to slow down a little bit more, hopefully around 20 or maybe 15 meters per second of a descent speed. It's very hard to judge what kind of land I'm coming down on from this camera, and I don't want to go into the external view because that would be cheating. So it's very hard to judge if I'm on a slope. It looks flat. And you can see I've turned on the caution warning, the slope alarm system, although I don't know how exactly that's going to work. It may tell me that I'm on a slope when I'm already plowing my nose into the ground. So I'm just going to have to go with the nav ball here. And yeah, there's my shadow. Rolling around would kind of help me judge the slope a little bit better, but I honestly picked a really bad time to do this because the sun is directly overhead, so the shadows basically don't exist right now. And you can see I'm coming down almost directly on top of my shadow. So now, yeah, about 10 meters per second, 300 meters up. So we've got about 30 seconds before we touch down. Now, on the Apollo missions, they picked their launch windows so that they were landing in the morning on the moon. And that way, the shadows would be very long and they'd be able to actually see contrast in the terrain. They deliberately avoided landing in lunar daytime, lunar noon, because then the sun is coming directly overhead and there's basically no shadows. And I believe it was either one of the astronauts or the administrators described it as coming down over a sea of milk because you wouldn't be able to see any differences in the terrain. Kind of like what I'm doing now. So 5 meters per second, 50 meters up. This is honestly pretty hard to juggle. So let myself fall a little more. Here comes my shadow. 4 meters per second. And throttle up at the last second. Okay, and we're tilting over. Come on. Come on, hold it. Keep it together. Get back up there. And we're falling. Yeah. So we were on a slope. And yeah, now I'm just kind of flying over sideways. Trying to figure out... Yeah, you can see I'm going away from the crater rim now. And this place looks a bit flat, so we're going to try and come down here. 15 meters per second. I sped this up here because you've seen this already. And it was honestly pretty tedious to fly. We've still got plenty of delta V. Enough to get us most of the way into orbit. So, 10 meters per second, 200 meters up. You know, all that stuff. Just gently coming down, keeping our speed. This time, I'm very careful with my horizontal speed. You can see I'm trying to keep it below a couple hundred millimeters per second there. Because any horizontal speed can be pretty lethal with this thing. And we have contact light. And the craft is holding stable. There's Kerman in the window there. So I turn off stability briefly, and it looks good. We're holding the position. So now it's time to get out and do some science. There's Kerman out the window there. Beautiful sight. With the terrain of the moon there. So now it is time for us to go on EVA. And oh yeah, we're definitely on a slope. And we're falling over. Quick. Yeah, get out of there. And yeah, at this point, you know, I basically just give up on the idea of landing in IVA and don't want to take any more risks because I don't have a lot more fuel in this thing. So I'm just going to go with the indicator there. Try and touch down right on there. This place is not a very good area for landing. It's very, very hilly, which was undesirable, but it was very difficult to see in the internal camera there. So just gently bring it down right on there. And yeah, you can really see just how narrow the base of this lander is. Just keep it together. Come on. There we go. Still tilting over a little bit much for my liking. But I think we'll be good. And we have comms link, so the probe should be able to keep him stable. And we're not falling over. Beautiful. Yes. So now it's time for us to actually do some of the things that we came here for. Like science and planting a flag. So let's see what he says. Let's first lower his visor. Protect him from the sun's harsh rays. And hop off the side and touch down. Angee Kerman. This is a historic moment. The first Kerbal to set foot on another celestial body. Let's plant the flag. Commemorate the occasion. What shall he say? What will we call this historic sight? 3-point landing. 3-point landing. Because yes. Because we touched the ground 3 different times. Very well. Very much indeed. There's the planet of Kerman in the sky there. Let's see. Yeah, there he is. And it's too high to get in the frame, but oh well. So yeah, now it's time to actually do some science. Take the EVA. You start to say something dramatic and poignant about the plight of Kerbal kind in this grand universe, only to be cut off by random radio chatter that the situation is nominal. Which is good confirmation to have after everything we just went through. And now it's time for the rest of the experiments. So Angee Kerman flies around here. Because he's a scientist, he can conduct the experiments externally and also reset them. So he does mystery goo. It seems less dense here. The pressure scan and the thermometer, which we will have to get him out and reach later. Admire the view. Now he needs to get out, fly around the back of the spacecraft and take the temperature. the airport, and get back inside. Oh, we need to grab the data out of the thermometer first. Then we can go inside. And now, we do have a good bit of fuel, and the nearest biome is pretty close to us, which would be either the Midlands or the Highlands on the outside of the crater. So we're going to see if we can land this thing again. And I'm not going to try to do it in the IVA mode because I don't have nearly enough margin for error to, fix something if there were to be a mistake. And looking at my delta view here, I don't think I'm going to have enough to land. Yeah, going at like 250 meters per second. We have 13 left in this stage. It's going to be barely anything. So we have to abandon the idea, unfortunately, of leaving this landing stage as a marker of our progress on the surface. And yeah, instead we're just going to have to go into orbit from here. Burn out that stage and fire up the escape engine. And yeah, at this point we just get back into orbit around the moon, and we'll just have to plot our return back to Kerbin. So it's a pretty standard orbital injection. We have tons of fuel in this thing. We could land this thing again on the moon if we wanted to, but we have a life support limit, and we want to get him home before he runs out. So now that we've got ourselves on a suborbital trajectory, go ahead to the apoapsis that we've got ourselves, circularize the orbit. It is a bit inclined, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And now we can just start plotting our return back to Kerbin. 37 kilometers is pretty good. And we just warp ahead. 300 meters per second here. Get ourselves lined up and ignite the engines. Admire the view there. Sun rises on two bodies. And get our periapsis set up. And now the concern is he has an hour and a half of life support left, and we're on a very long orbit. So I use the rest of the fuel here to slow us down and keep our periapsis at about 34, 35 kilometers. Just so that if we do end up skipping off the atmosphere, he's not going to actually die on the way around. Flying the reentry in this thing is pretty simple. You just kind of got to keep it pointed along the retrograde vector so that we don't overheat the capsule and lose everything that we just worked so hard for. Very bright, very fiery. But eventually we make it through. This is the fastest reentry we've ever had to deal with. Possibly a little faster than Jonas is, although in the same regime. But we make it through okay. And once we finish burning our ablator away, we come down, and in fact we're coming down over another town, and in the Badlands, no less. So there comes our parachutes spinning down on top of this city. Once again, we've got a kind of reputation for this. And we lose the heat shield. It gets out, plants a flag to commemorate the occasion. Data from this will surely help us in future missions, but that will be in another episode. Until next time.